On October 14, 1977, Dr. Eleanor Vance signed the guest register at Briarcliff Conference Center in rural Vermont. She checked into room 12, attended the opening reception for the American Society of Behavioral Research, and was photographed shaking hands with the organization's president. At 11:43 that night, the night porter heard her door close. No one saw Eleanor Vance alive again. The state police ruled it a hiking accident, case closed in 9 days, but they never explained why a woman afraid of heights would climb alone to Shepherd's Bluff, or why her conference materials, her research notes, and her entire presentation were missing from her locked room, or why, of the 41 scholars who attended that weekend, not a single one would speak about what happened at Briarcliff. 41 people, 41 years of silence. Paula Ostrowski had spent 18 months trying to find them. A documentary filmmaker specializing in cold cases, she'd first heard about Briarcliff from an archivist at Boston University, who mentioned, almost as an aside, that an entire academic conference had simply vanished from institutional memory. No proceedings published, no papers cited, no photographs in any university archive. Ostrowski pulled the conference program from a microfilm collection in Albany. 41 names. She started making calls. The first 12 numbers were disconnected or belonged to people who'd died. The next 15 reached answering machines that were never returned. The 8 who picked up hung up within 30 seconds of hearing the word Briarcliff. That left 6. 6 people still alive who might remember what happened to Eleanor Vance. The first to agree to meet was Dr. Howard Kimball, now 74, retired from Michigan State's psychology department. He'd asked Ostrowski to come to his lake house, 2 hours north of Lansing. When she arrived, he was sitting on the dock, watching the water.
You're the filmmaker.
Dr. Kimball, thank you for seeing me.
I almost didn't. Threw your letter away twice. Fished it out of the trash both times.
Why did you change your mind?
Kimball didn't answer for a long moment. He kept his eyes on the lake.
I'm 74 years old. I've had 3 heart attacks, and I still dream about that conference center. The smell of the coffee urns, the sound the radiators made at night.
What happened there?
Nothing. That's what we all agreed to say. Nothing happened at Briarcliff.
Dr. Kimball, Eleanor Vance died during that conference. The police ruled it an accident.
I know what the police ruled.
You don't believe it was an accident.
Kimball finally turned to look at her. His eyes were watery, red-rimmed.
I believe Eleanor went up that bluff. I believe she fell. Beyond that, I don't know anything.
Her research materials were missing from her room.
Were they?
You were on the program committee. You knew what she was presenting.
I knew the title. Institutional Compliance and the Manufacture of Consent. Very theoretical. Very dry.
What was it actually about?
Kimball stood up slowly, gripping the dock railing.
Miss Ostrowski, I agreed to meet you because I'm tired of dreaming about Briarcliff, but I can't help you. I was in my room that night. I heard nothing. I saw nothing, just like everyone else.
Ostrowski drove back to her motel in Lansing and spread her materials across the bed. The conference program listed 41 attendees from 23 universities. Eleanor Vance had come from the University of Wisconsin, where she'd been an associate professor of sociology. Her specialty was institutional behavior, specifically how organizations maintained secrecy. Ostrowski had obtained Vance's faculty file through a Freedom of Information request. Most of it was routine, tenure documents and course evaluations, but one page stood out. A letter from the department chair, dated 3 weeks before Briarcliff, recommending that Vance's sabbatical request be denied due to concerns about her research direction. The letter referenced a funding source that had expressed displeasure. The funding source wasn't named, but in the margin someone had written in pencil, talked to Harmon first. Dr. Bernard Harmon had been the president of the American Society of Behavioral Research in 1977. He died in 1989, but his widow, Constance, still lived in the house they'd shared in Evanston. She agreed to meet Ostrowski on a Thursday afternoon.
Bernard never talked about that conference. Not once in 12 years.
Did you ask him about it?
Once, right after he came home. He looked at me and said, "Connie, I need you to never mention Briarcliff again." And I didn't.
Mrs. Harmon, your husband was photographed with Eleanor Vance at the opening reception.
I saw that photograph. It was in his papers when he died.
Do you still have it?
Constance Harmon walked to a desk in the corner of the living room and opened a drawer. She handed Ostrowski a black and white photograph. Eleanor Vance, smiling, shaking hands with Bernard Harmon. Behind them, slightly out of focus, a man in a dark suit was watching.
Mrs. Harmon, do you know who this man is? The one in the background.
I asked Bernard the same thing. He said he was a foundation representative.
Which foundation?
He didn't say, but I remember he seemed upset that the man was in the photograph at all. He kept it separate from everything else.
Ostrowski studied the image. The man was perhaps 45, clean-shaven, wearing a suit that looked more expensive than anything else in the room. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were fixed on Eleanor Vance with uncomfortable intensity.
Did your husband ever mention the name Crestwood?
Crestwood. That was the foundation. Yes, the Crestwood Foundation. They funded Bernard's research for years.
What kind of research?
Behavioral psychology, group dynamics, how people respond to authority.
Ostrowski wrote the name in her notebook. The Crestwood Foundation. She'd never heard of it. The Crestwood Foundation had no public records. No tax filings Ostrowski could locate. No address. No board of directors. No annual reports. But the name appeared in 3 academic papers from the 1970s. Always in the acknowledgments section. Always thanking Crestwood for research support. All 3 papers dealt with compliance behavior. All 3 authors had attended the Briarcliff Conference. At the University of Wisconsin archives, Ostrowski found Eleanor Vance's dissertation from 1968. It was titled Obedience and Institutional Memory: How Organizations Forget What They Choose Not to Know. The acknowledgments thanked her advisor, her family, and a research grant from the Crestwood Foundation. Vance had been funded by Crestwood for almost a decade. Whatever she was planning to present at Briarcliff, she'd been building toward it for years. The second person who agreed to meet Ostrowski was Dr. Frances Cho, now teaching at a small college in New Hampshire. She'd been a graduate student in 1977, attending Briarcliff to present her first conference paper. When Ostrowski arrived at her office, Cho was grading papers with a red pen.
I remember Eleanor Vance. She was kind to me, asked about my research. Most of the senior scholars ignored the graduate students.
Did you attend her presentation?
There was no presentation. She was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, but she never showed up.
Because she was already dead.
We didn't know that then. We just knew she wasn't there. Dr. Harmon announced that she'd had a family emergency and left Earth.
But her car was still in the parking lot.
Cho's pen stopped moving.
Was it?
The police report lists it. Brown 1973 Volvo. Still there Sunday morning when they found her body.
I didn't know about the car. We were told she'd left. That's what everyone believed.
Dr. Cho, what do you remember about Friday night?
The reception ended around 10. I went back to my room. I could hear people talking in the hallway, doors opening and closing. Normal conference sounds.
Did you hear anything unusual?
Cho set down her pen and folded her hands.
Around midnight, I heard footsteps. Several people walking past my door, moving quickly. Not running, but purposeful.
How many people?
4 or 5, maybe more. I opened my door to look, but the hallway was empty. Just the smell of cigarette smoke. And then I heard a car start outside.
I thought you said her car was still there in the morning.
It was. This was a different car. I looked out my window and saw taillights disappearing down the access road. A dark sedan. I went back to sleep.
Ostrowski wrote it down. A second car. One that left in the middle of the night and was never mentioned in any report. Ostrowski returned to her research with a new question. Who else had been at Briarcliff that weekend, besides the 41 registered attendees? The conference center's records had been destroyed in a fire in 1982, but the state police report listed everyone interviewed. 41 scholars, 2 staff members, and one additional name, Robert Penfield, identified as a Foundation liaison. There was no Robert Penfield in any academic directory. No Robert Penfield associated with the Crestwood Foundation or any other organization Ostrowski could find. But there was a Robert Penfield who had died in a car accident in Maryland in 1979. Single vehicle, no witnesses. The obituary listed his occupation as consultant.
I'm trying to reach anyone who knew Robert Penfield. He died in 79.
I'm sorry, who is this?
My name is Paula Ostrowski. I'm a documentary filmmaker researching.
Ostrowski tracked down the third willing witness in Florida. Dr. Gerald Marsh had been an associate professor at Columbia in 1977. Now 81, he lived in a retirement community near Tampa. He met her in the common room, surrounded by other residents, playing cards.
I don't know why you're wasting your time. Eleanor Vance had a hiking accident. Tragic, but not mysterious.
You knew her well.
We were colleagues, same research interests. We'd corresponded for years.
About compliance behavior.
About institutional psychology. How organizations shape individual decisions.
Dr. Marsh, I've read Eleanor Vance's dissertation. I've read her published papers. None of them explain why someone would want her dead.
Marsh's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened on the arms of his chair.
No one wanted her dead. That's a ridiculous suggestion.
Then why won't anyone talk about what she was researching?
Her research was perfectly ordinary. Compliance studies. How people follow instructions from authority figures.
Like the Milgram experiments.
Similar, less famous. She was interested in how institutions create compliance without explicit orders, how people learn to do what's expected without being told.
And the Crestwood Foundation funded this research.
Marsh went very still.
Where did you hear that name?
It's in her dissertation acknowledgements. It's in 3 other papers from conference attendees. What was the Crestwood Foundation, Dr. Marsh?
A private foundation. They funded behavioral research.
There are no public records, no tax filings, no address.
It was a private foundation. They valued discretion.
Who ran it?
Marsh looked around the common room, as if checking to see who might be listening.
I think we're done here, Miss Ostrowski.
Ostrowski spent 2 weeks searching for any trace of the Crestwood Foundation. She found nothing in foundation directories, nothing in grant databases, nothing in academic archives. But she did find a reference in an unexpected place. A 1975 congressional hearing on intelligence activities. A witness had testified about private foundations used to channel government funding to sensitive research projects. The foundations existed on paper only, administered by law firms or accounting offices, their true sponsors invisible. The witness mentioned 3 foundations by name. Crestwood was the second. The hearing transcript noted that further testimony on Crestwood was classified. Ostrowski sat back in her chair and stared at the screen. Eleanor Vance had spent a decade being funded by an organization that was, at least in part, a front for intelligence activities. And she'd been killed 2 days before presenting research on how institutions maintain secrecy. The 4th person to agree to meet Ostrowski was Dr. Martin Caldwell, who had been a junior faculty member at Yale in 1977. He was now semi-retired, teaching 1 seminar a year and living in a farmhouse outside New Haven. When Ostrowski arrived, he was chopping wood.
I wondered when someone would start asking questions. Took longer than I expected.
You've been waiting.
I've been watching. Every few years, someone mentions Briarcliff. A journalist, a researcher. They make a few calls, hit a wall, move on.
I'm not moving on.
Caldwell set down his axe and wiped his forehead.
No, I can see that. You've been at this for almost 2 years. You've talked to Kimball, Cho, Marsh. You found out about Crestwood.
How do you know who I've talked to?
Because they called me. They always call me. I'm the one who's supposed to make sure everyone stays quiet.
You're the one who organized the silence.
I'm the one who explained the situation. After Eleanor died, after the police finished their investigation, I gathered everyone in the main conference room and told them what would happen if they talked.
Threatened them.
Warned them. There's a difference.
What did you warn them about?
Caldwell gestured toward the house.
Let's go inside. This is going to take a while.
The farmhouse kitchen was warm, a wood stove burning in the corner. Caldwell poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from Ostrowski at a scarred pine table.
You need to understand the context. 1977. The church committee hearings had just finished. Everyone knew the intelligence agencies had been funding academic research for decades. What no one knew was how deep it went.
And Eleanor Vance knew.
Eleanor Vance had figured it out. All of it. The Crestwood Foundation was one of a dozen fronts. They funded legitimate research, behavioral psychology, social compliance studies. But the real purpose was to develop techniques, ways to influence people without their knowledge.
Mind control.
Nothing so dramatic. Persuasion, compliance, how to make someone do what you want while believing it was their own idea. The research was real. The applications were classified.
And Eleanor Vance was part of this.
For 10 years, like the rest of us, we took the grants, did the research, published the sanitized versions. We told ourselves it was legitimate science.
What changed?
Caldwell stared into his coffee cup.
Eleanor started asking questions. Where the money really came from, how the research was being used. She requested files through academic channels. She talked to people who'd worked on related projects.
She was investigating her own sponsors.
She was writing a paper that would expose the entire network. Names, dates, funding flows, applications, everything.
Her Briarcliff presentation. Institutional Compliance and the Manufacture of Consent.
The title was deliberately vague, but everyone who mattered knew what she was going to say. She'd sent a preview to Harmon a month before the conference. He panicked.
Bernard Harmon, the conference president.
Bernie had been coordinating with Crestwood for 15 years. He'd built his entire career on their funding. If Eleanor went public, he'd be destroyed. We all would.
So he contacted the foundation.
He contacted Robert Penfield, the liaison, the man in the photograph.
The one who died in a car accident 2 years later.
Caldwell nodded slowly.
Penfield showed up at Briarcliff on Thursday, the day before the conference started. He had a private meeting with Harmon, then another with Eleanor. I don't know what was said, but by Friday morning, Eleanor seemed different, distracted, frightened.
They threatened her.
I assume so, but she didn't back down.
What happened Friday night?
The reception ended at 10. Eleanor went back to her room. Penfield left around the same time. I thought it was over.
But it wasn't.
Around 11, Harmon knocked on my door. He said we had a problem. Eleanor had told him she was going to present her paper regardless of the consequences. She'd made copies, sent them to colleagues at other universities.
So killing her wouldn't suppress the research.
That's what I said. Harmon said Penfield had a different approach. He wanted to discredit her first, make her look unstable, paranoid. Then if the paper surfaced later, no one would believe it.
How were they going to discredit her?
Caldwell's hands were shaking around his coffee cup.
I don't know. I told Harmon I wanted no part of it. I went back to my room. The next morning, Eleanor was gone. And 2 days later, they found her body.
You said you organized the silence after she died. What exactly did you tell everyone?
I told them the truth, part of it, that Eleanor's death was connected to her research, that the people responsible had resources we couldn't imagine, that if anyone talked, they'd be next.
And everyone agreed to stay quiet.
Everyone was terrified. We'd all taken Crestwood money. We'd all been compromised. The silence wasn't hard to enforce.
Dr. Caldwell, You've just told me things that could destroy careers, reopen investigations, expose a government cover-up. Why?
Caldwell finished his coffee and set down the cup.
Because I'm 72 years old, because I've been carrying this for 18 years, and because you're going to find out anyway. I'd rather you heard the truth from me than piece together a version that makes me look worse than I am.
How could it be worse?
I didn't tell you everything. I told you what I knew at the time. What I learned later, that's different.
Caldwell walked to a cabinet in the corner of the kitchen and removed a manila folder. It was yellowed with age, the edges soft from handling.
I received this 3 years after Briarcliff, 1980. No return address, no letter, just documents.
He handed the folder to Ostrowski. Inside were photocopies of internal memoranda, typed on plain paper with no letterhead. The dates ranged from October 1977 to February 1978.
What am I looking at?
After-action reports. That's what they're called. Summaries of an operation.
Ostrowski began reading. The first memo described a subject designated V, who had been identified as a security risk. The second outlined a containment strategy. The third reported that containment had been achieved through natural causes.
Natural causes. They're talking about Eleanor's death.
Keep reading.
The fourth memo was longer. It described the successful recovery of primary materials from the subject's room. It listed the number of pages, the number of copies identified and retrieved, and the names of individuals who had received advance copies.
All distributed copies accounted for except 3. Recipients Klein, Marsh, and Yamamoto confirmed they destroyed their copies voluntarily. Recipient Hartley required additional persuasion.
Lawrence Hartley. He taught at Berkeley. Died in 1979.
How?
Suicide. That's what the report said.
Ostrowski turned to the final page. It was a list of names under the heading, Briarcliff attendees, compliance status. Each name had a check mark beside it. At the bottom, someone had written in ink, full containment achieved.
They tracked everyone. They made sure no one would talk.
And they succeeded. For 18 years.
Who sent you these documents?
I never found out. The postmark was Washington, D.C. That's all I know.
You've had these for 15 years. Why didn't you go public?
Caldwell laughed, but there was no humor in it.
Go public with what? Photocopies with no letterhead, no signatures, no verification? I'd look like a paranoid conspiracy theorist, which is exactly what they planned for Eleanor.
But you kept them.
I kept them. I made copies. I put them in safe deposit boxes in 3 different states. If something happens to me, the boxes go to journalists.
That's why you're still alive.
That's why we're all still alive. Everyone who knows something has insurance. The only people who died were the ones who didn't understand the rules.
Eleanor Vance. Lawrence Hartley. Robert Penfield.
Penfield knew the rules. He just stopped being useful.
Ostrowski left Caldwell's farmhouse with the documents and a list of names. 3 people who had received advance copies of Eleanor Vance's research and were still alive. Dr. Gerald Marsh in Florida, Dr. Francis Cho in New Hampshire, and Dr. Akiko Yamamoto in California. Marsh had claimed to know nothing. Cho had heard footsteps in the night. Yamamoto hadn't returned any of Ostrowski's calls.
Hello? Dr. Yamamoto, my name is Paula Ostrowski. I'm a documentary filmmaker. Please don't hang up.
There was a long pause.
You're the one who's been asking about Briarcliff.
Yes.
I told myself I wouldn't talk. For 18 years, I told myself that.
What changed?
Martin Caldwell called me this morning. He said you have the documents. He said it's time.
Ostrowski flew to San Francisco the next day. Dr. Akiko Yamamoto lived in a modest house in Berkeley, surrounded by books and the accumulated papers of a 40-year academic career. She served tea in her living room and spoke without prompting.
Eleanor sent me her paper 2 weeks before Briarcliff. She wanted my opinion. She knew I'd been funded by Crestwood, too.
What did you think when you read it?
I thought it was the most important thing anyone in our field had ever written. I also thought it would destroy everyone it named.
Including yourself.
Including myself.
I'd taken their money for 8 years. I'd published research that was used for purposes I didn't want to know about.
Did you try to stop her?
I told her to be careful. I told her to make copies and hide them. I told her that the people behind Crestwood didn't lose gracefully.
Did she listen?
She listened, but she didn't stop.
Dr. Yamamoto, you destroyed your copy of the paper. The documents say so.
The documents are wrong.
Yamamoto set down her teacup and walked to a bookshelf. She pulled out a thick academic journal and opened it to reveal a hollow space. Inside was a single manila envelope.
I burned the photocopy they gave me. But Eleanor had sent the original by registered mail. It arrived 2 days after she died.
Ostrowski's hands were shaking as she took the envelope. Inside was a typescript, 63 pages, titled Institutional Compliance and the Manufacture of Consent, a documented history of academic complicity in intelligence operations.
I've had it for 18 years. I've read it maybe 100 times. I've never shown it to anyone.
Why keep it?
Because Eleanor died for it. Because someone should know the truth. Because I was waiting for someone who would do something about it.
Ostrowski spent 3 days reading Eleanor Vance's paper. It was meticulous, devastating, and thoroughly documented. Vance had traced the connections between the Crestwood Foundation and 7 intelligence agencies across 4 countries. She had identified 37 academics who had knowingly participated in research programs designed to manipulate public opinion, influence elections, and develop interrogation techniques. She had named the administrators, the lawyers, the accountants who made it possible. But the final section was what made the paper dangerous. Vance had discovered that the research hadn't stopped when the programs were officially terminated in the early 70s. It had simply moved to new foundations, new universities, new names. The network was still active, and the American Society of Behavioral Research, the organization hosting the Briarcliff Conference, was at its center.
That's why they killed her. Not for what she knew about the past, for what she could prove about the present.
The last person on Ostrowski's list was the most difficult to find. Dr. Howard Kimball had mentioned Bernard Harmon, the conference president. But Harmon was dead. His widow had provided context, but no proof. Caldwell had given her documents and names. Yamamoto had given her the paper itself. But one name kept appearing in every account, always at the margins, never fully explained. Robert Penfield. Penfield had no academic credentials, no public profile, no trail. But in Vance's paper, he appeared as a program coordinator who had attended 17 academic conferences between 1970 and 1977. Each conference had at least one attendee who later died unexpectedly or experienced career-ending scandals. Ostrowski began cross-referencing the names: 6 deaths, 4 resignations, 2 institutionalizations, and Robert Penfield had been at every conference where the targets were present. The trail led Ostrowski to a name in Penfield's obituary: his sister, Margaret Penfield Hollister, who had served as his emergency contact. She still lived in Maryland, in the same house where Robert had grown up. When Ostrowski called, a woman's voice answered on the first ring.
Who gave you this number?
Your brother's obituary. Mrs. Hollister, I'm researching a conference from 1977. Your brother was there.
Robert went to a lot of conferences.
A woman died at this one. Eleanor Vance.
There was a long silence.
I remember that name. Robert came home from that trip different. Wouldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He kept saying he'd made a mistake.
What kind of mistake?
He never told me. But 2 years later, he was dead. And the men who came to his funeral, they weren't from any foundation I'd ever heard of.
Ostrowski drove to Maryland. Margaret Hollister met her at the door with the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust strangers. But she let Ostrowski in and served coffee in a living room that hadn't changed since the 1970s.
Robert was a good man. People think because of what he did, but he believed he was serving his country.
What did he do exactly?
I never knew the details. He worked for a consulting firm that did government contracts. He traveled to universities, met with professors. He said he was helping coordinate research.
Did he ever mention the Crestwood Foundation?
Hollister's cup rattled against its saucer.
That was the firm, Crestwood Consulting. That's what he told our mother. But I found papers after he died. The real name was different.
What was the real name?
I don't know if I should tell you. The people Robert worked for, they're still out there.
Mrs. Hollister, I've spent 2 years investigating what happened at Briarcliff. I've talked to witnesses. I've read documents that were never supposed to exist. I've seen Eleanor Vance's research, the paper she was killed for. I know what your brother was part of.
Then why do you need me?
Because everyone else can tell me what happened. You might be the only person who can tell me why.
Hollister set down her coffee and walked to a closet in the hallway. She returned with a cardboard box, its corners soft with age.
Robert's things. The men at the funeral wanted them, but I wouldn't give them up. He was my brother.
Inside the box were photographs, letters, and a leather-bound journal. The journal's pages were filled with neat handwriting, dates and locations and names.
He wrote everything down. I think he knew, at the end, that someone would come looking. I think he wanted them to find the truth.
Robert Penfield's journal covered 10 years, from 1968 to 1978. The entries were cryptic, but consistent. He used code names for people and organizations, but the pattern was clear. He had been a handler, managing relationships between intelligence agencies and academic researchers. His job was to identify promising scholars, offer them funding, and guide their research toward useful applications. The entry for October 1977 was longer than most. Penfield had written, "EV refused final offer. Harmon panicking. Washington wants containment. I warned them this would happen. She's too smart to scare and too principled to buy. Only one option left. God help me." The next entry was dated 2 days later. "It's done. Natural causes. The woman who knew everything is gone. And I helped kill her."
He knew exactly what he was doing.
I read that journal after Robert died. I didn't understand most of it, but I understood enough.
Why didn't you go to the authorities?
The authorities? Miss Ostrowski, my brother worked for the authorities. He worked for people who could make problems disappear, who could make people disappear. You think I was going to walk into a police station with his diary?
You could have gone to the press.
And say what? My dead brother helped kill people for the government? Without proof? Without witnesses? They'd have called me a grieving woman with delusions.
Ostrowski closed the journal and looked at Hollister.
I have proof now. I have documents. I have the paper Eleanor Vance died for. I have witnesses who are finally willing to talk. And I have your brother's own words.
What are you going to do with it?
I'm going to make a documentary. I'm going to tell the truth. And I'm going to find whoever gave the order.
Ostrowski returned to New York with everything she needed. Eleanor Vance's paper, Martin Caldwell's documents, Robert Penfield's journal, interviews with 4 witnesses who had finally broken their silence. She began editing the documentary in January 1996. By March, she had a rough cut. By April, she was getting phone calls.
Miss Ostrowski, we understand you're working on a project about Briarcliff.
Who is this?
Someone who knew Eleanor Vance. Someone who was there that night.
If you want to go on record.
I don't want to go on record. I want to warn you. The people who killed Eleanor are still active. They've been watching you for months. They know everyone you've talked to. They know what you have.
Are you threatening me?
I'm trying to save your life. Finish your documentary. But be very careful who you trust.
Ostrowski traced the call to a payphone in Washington, D.C. The caller had used a voice distortion device, but something in the phrasing was familiar. Someone who knew Eleanor Vance. Someone who was there that night. Only a handful of people fit both criteria. One of them was Dr. Gerald Marsh, the man who had claimed to know nothing in Florida. She flew to Tampa without calling ahead. When she arrived at Marsh's retirement community, the front desk told her he had checked out 3 days earlier. No forwarding address, no explanation. His apartment had been cleaned and his belongings removed.
His son came to collect him. Said it was a family emergency.
Dr. Marsh didn't have a son.
Well, someone signed him out. Showed ID and everything. Nice man. Very professional.
Marsh had vanished, and Ostrowski was running out of time. Ostrowski began working faster, longer hours, fewer precautions. She made copies of everything and sent them to 3 different locations. She hired a lawyer and prepared a statement to be released if anything happened to her. And she started reaching out to journalists who might help her get the documentary distributed. The knock came at 2 a.m. Ostrowski was still at her editing bay when she heard it. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a dark suit, alone, holding a briefcase.
Miss Ostrowski, my name is Arthur Webb. I represent certain interests that would like to discuss your documentary.
I don't know any Arthur Webb.
No.
But you know the name Crestwood. And you know what happened to people who didn't listen to warnings.
Ostrowski's hand was steady as she reached for the phone.
I'm calling the police. That's your right. But before you do, you should know that Dr. Marsh is safe. He's also willing to testify. If you'll open the door, I'll explain.
Arthur Webb was not what Ostrowski expected. He was 70 years old, retired from a career he refused to name, and he had been waiting for someone like her for almost 2 decades.
I worked with Robert Penfield. We were colleagues at Crestwood for 12 years. When he started having doubts, I was assigned to watch him. You were there when he died. I was the one who made it look like an accident. And I've regretted it every day since. Why are you here now? Because I'm the one who sent the documents to Caldwell. I'm the one who called you last month. And I'm the one who got Marsh out before they could silence him permanently. The people who killed Eleanor Vance. They're not the same people. The ones who gave the order are dead or retired. But the organisation survives. New names, new faces, same methods. They've been monitoring your investigation since you started. They know everything. Then why haven't they stopped me? Because they're trying to decide if killing you would cause more problems than letting you talk. You said Marsh is willing to testify. Testify to what? To what he saw that night. He was there, Miss Ostrowski, in the hallway. He saw Penfield and 2 other men take Eleanor Vance from her room. He told me he was asleep. He lied. He's been lying for 18 years because he was afraid. But when I showed him your documentary, when I showed him Eleanor's paper and Penfield's journal, he broke down. He wants to tell the truth before he dies.
Ostrowski sat down slowly.
Let me make sure I understand. Eleanor Vance was taken from her room by Robert Penfield and 2 accomplices. They killed her and staged it to look like a hiking accident. The conference attendees were threatened into silence, and the organisation responsible has been operating for another 18 years. That's correct. Who gave the order? A man named Harrison Collier, Deputy Director of Domestic Operations. He died in 1984, but his successor is still alive, and he's the one who's been watching you.
The name was Charles Eaton. He had been Harrison Collier's protege, rising through the ranks of an organization that didn't officially exist. By 1996, he was 71 years old and living in Georgetown, consulting for defense contractors and attending charity galas. Webb had photographs, financial records, and a list of operations Eaton had supervised since taking over from Collier.
He won't talk to you. He'll deny everything. But if you can get him on camera, if you can confront him with what you know, he'll have me arrested. Or worse, maybe. Or maybe he'll realise that the truth is already out, that killing you won't stop it anymore.
Ostrowski looked at the evidence spread across her table. Eleanor Vance's paper, the internal documents, Penfield's journal, Marsh's upcoming testimony, Webb's photographs.
This is what she died for. the truth about how institutions protect themselves, how they silence the people who ask questions. And now you have a choice. You can publish what you have and hope it's enough, or you can confront the man responsible and give him a chance to respond. That's not a choice. That's journalism.
The documentary aired on PBS in September 1996. Paula Ostrowski had titled it The Conference at Briarcliff. It ran for 90 minutes and included interviews with 5 witnesses, documents from 3 sources, and a confrontation with Charles Eaton outside his Georgetown home. Eaton had refused to comment, walking past the camera with his hand raised, but his face had told the story. The face of a man who had finally been seen. The morning after the broadcast, Ostrowski found an envelope under her door. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Eleanor Vance, standing at Shepherd's Bluff. The Vermont hills spread out behind her. On the back, someone had written in faded ink, "The truth waits for those who have the courage to find it. E.V. October 1977. 3 weeks later, a federal court sealed all records related to the case, citing national security concerns. The lawsuits were dismissed. The witnesses went silent. Charles Eaton died peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, his obituary noting only his service to his country. But the documentary exists. The paper exists. The truth, as Eleanor Vance wrote, waits for those who have the courage to find it. Paula Ostrowski is still looking.